The first time I saw my daughter's face crumple in confusion, it felt like the ground slipped from under me. Julia was only 6 years old, bright-eyed and always eager to belong. That morning, she had darted forward at my mother's insistence, thrilled to grab one of the glossy Christmas cards sitting on the dining table. Family tradition, my mom had called it, though the truth was it was more like a yearly performance. With my sister Becky and her picture-perfect family always at center stage. Julia adored these little rituals, anything that made her feel part of something bigger. But as she scanned the card, her smile faltered. She tilted her head, squinted, and kept looking, her small finger tracing faces. Cousins Jesse and Ryan were right in the front, their polished shoes and stiffly gelled hair gleaming under the photographer's light. Becky stood behind them with her husband Jason, both radiating the kind of glossy perfection my parents loved to flaunt. Even my mom and dad were there, stiff but included. Julia's hand trembled slightly as she asked, "Where am I?" I leaned closer, my heart already tightening. She had been there that day, I remembered clearly, her in the front row, pale yellow dress with daisies, clutching Jesse's hand for courage. But on the card, it was as if she had never existed. I grabbed another card, flipping fast, hoping it was just one bad print. Julia did the same. Card after card, until her little voice cracked. "Maybe I'm hiding. Maybe I'm too small." Her words broke me. The truth was brutal. Someone had gone out of their way to erase her. Where her shoes should have been. The floorboards were crudely copied and pasted. Jessie's hand curved unnaturally, like it had once been holding hers but now gripped only air. Julia's breathing quickened, her lips trembling. She dropped the stack onto the table, wide eyes filling with tears. "Why am I not in any?" she whispered. I pulled her close, my arms wrapped tight around her as she shook. She was 6 years old, and she already knew the sting of being erased. My fury burned like ice under my skin. But I stayed silent. Across the room, my mother adjusted a card on the mantel, commenting smugly that the colors looked so clean this year. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat. "Becky finally looks uniform." Uniform. As though my daughter had been a stain they needed to scrub out. Julia wiped her face on her sleeve, whispering, but I was smiling. No one answered. My dad muttered something about wanting the photo tidy. My mom chimed in, flat and unbothered, that they had all agreed it was better this way. Julia's dress hadn't matched. She claimed, "It had ruined the photo. It's not personal." But it was personal. Every inch of my body knew it. I held Julia tighter, swallowing down the scream clawing its way up my throat. That night, in the attic room we shared, Julia clutched her stuffed bunny while I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. We had been pushed up here after moving back home when her father left, crammed into a drafty space with sloped walls and peeling paint, while my nephews had entire bedrooms to themselves. My childhood room had long been transformed into Ryan's shrine, even though he only visited occasionally. Becky's room, of course, remained untouched, pristine like a monument. Julia noticed the unfairness now she was old enough. "Why do I share with you? Why don't I have my own room?" she'd asked one evening. I told her it was temporary, though I knew it wasn't. Cruelty. I had learned. Didn't always shout. Sometimes it was silent, like a glitter name above a nephew's door while your daughter slept cramped beside you. I couldn't let them erase Julia the way they had erased me. I thought back to my childhood, where Becky got piano lessons and sports teams while I scrubbed floors, when Grandma needed help. It was me who carried her upstairs, me who missed out so Becky's schedule could remain untouched. When Becky married, my parents showered her with money down payment for her house, furniture, renovations while I was told not to drain them dry when I asked for help with rent. Even after Julia was born, they denied me the smallest support while lavishing Becky with gifts. I had swallowed the bitterness for years, but now they had turned that cruelty onto Julia, and I felt something in me break. I reached for my phone that night, ready to text a friend who worked at a bar. They always needed extra help, and I knew if I picked up night shifts, it could be our way out. No rest, no sleep, but freedom doesn't come cheap. My fingers typed before I could second guess. Do you still need night staff? I'll take the shifts. I hit send and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't let my daughter grow up believing she didn't matter. Later that night, I slipped into Grandma's room. She was propped up in bed with her crossword, her lamp casting a warm glow. I handed her one of the Christmas cards. Her brows knitted as she saw the blank space where Julia should have been. Julia was there, she said, her voice low but firm. I nodded, tears stinging. Front row, yellow dress, but apparently yellow doesn't fit the uniform. I confessed my plan then, the night shifts, the long hours. I can't keep her here, not when they treat her like this. I'll save. We'll move out. Grandma was silent for a long time, eyes sharp in the lamplight. Finally, she said, you won't need to do that. When I frowned, she only added, leave it with me, and turned back to her crossword. I kissed her cheek and went back upstairs, uncertain of what she meant. But the next morning, I was about to find out. Morning light spilled across the dining table, where leftover decorations still lingered. Among them sat a small box, neatly wrapped, that I hadn't seen the night before. My mother noticed it first. Oh, how sweet, she said, plucking it up with a self-satisfied smile. A gift from Grandma. She peeled away the ribbon as if she were about to reveal some prize. Julia hovered behind me, curious but hesitant. When the lid came off, my mother's expression collapsed. Instead of trinkets or jewelry, the box contained a stack of official-looking documents. Her hand trembled as she skimmed the pages. My father leaned over her shoulder, and his mouth fell open. What is this? My mother demanded, her voice shrill. Is this some kind of joke? I leaned forward, heart pounding, catching sight of a header stamped with legal formatting and seals. Not a joke. At that moment, the hallway creaked and Grandma appeared, steady on her cane with a familiar lawyer beside her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. It's not a joke, she said calmly. That is an eviction notice, and I've already changed my will. Megan and Julia will have this house. You will get nothing. The silence that followed was explosive. My mother sputtered. My father paled. And Julia clutched my hand so tightly I could feel her small fingernails pressing into my skin. Then the shouting erupted. My mother's voice went shrill, accusing Grandma of being confused, of not knowing what she was signing. My father's tone turned smooth, almost pleading, urging her to think about the family. But Grandma stood firm, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. I am thinking about family, she said. The child you tried to erase is my family. The lawyer confirmed the documents were valid, witnessed, signed, and sealed. My father nearly staggered under the weight of it. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, after all the years of being invisible, shoved into attics and denied every ounce of support. I hadn't been the one to finally make a stand. It was Grandma, and she had chosen me. Julia whispered against my side. What's happening? I kissed her hair and murmured, something good. Finally something good. But the quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was plotting. For days afterward, the house was suffocating with the weight of unspoken resentment. My father hacked at shrubs that didn't need trimming. My mother clattered dishes with sharp, deliberate noise. Julia noticed. Is it over now? She asked one night. I wanted to lie and say yes, but I knew better. That silence wasn't resolution. It was a storm brewing. 3 mornings later, it arrived. A hard knock rattled the door. Julia slipped her hand into mine instinctively. My mother rushed ahead, her voice suddenly syrupy as she opened the door. Two uniformed police officers stood there with a woman holding a clipboard. Adult Protective Services. My stomach dropped. "We've had a report of possible elder abuse in this household," the taller officer announced. "We'll need to speak to everyone separately." Elder abuse. Of course, my parents had called them, twisting Grandma's decision into a weapon against me. I sat stiff on the couch as questions began. Did I prepare meals for my grandmother? Yes, I always had. Was I alone with her before she signed the new documents? Yes, but not during. Who was the man in her room that morning? Her lawyer. My answers were steady, but the officer's pen scratched with suspicion. And through it all, my mother whispered in the background, using words like confused, unsafe, and we're worried. My blood ran cold. If they arrested me, what would happen to Julia? But then I heard Grandma's voice through her door, steady and commanding. She insisted on coming out herself, leaning on her cane, but with iron in her tone. "No one forced me," she said. "I called my lawyer. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I changed my will because it is my right." Then she turned to the officers and added, "The only abuse in this house is the way they treat Megan and that child." The APS worker snapped her folder shut. "I don't see any concerns here. Everything appears in order." The officers nodded. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. Julia rushed into my arms, trembling but safe. Grandma wasn't finished. She turned her fury on my parents. "To call the police on your own daughter, to lie about me, to put my great-grandchild through this. You don't belong under my roof." My mother gasped, clinging to a chair. My father sat down heavily, words failing him. "You'll move out," Grandma declared. "I don't care how, but you will." That night, Julia slept soundly for the first time in weeks. I tucked her in and kissed her forehead, whispering that we were finally okay. And for once, I believed it. But deep down, I knew my parents wouldn't leave without another fight. They never did. The days after Grandma's ultimatum were quiet, but it was the kind of silence that carried teeth. My parents sat stiff at the table, barely speaking to me or Julia, their glances sharp and fleeting. Julia sensed it, too. She pressed closer to me in the evenings, whispering, "Are we okay now?" I kissed her hair and said yes, though in truth I felt the storm still circling us. It broke a week later, not with shouting or slammed doors, but with venom whispered in the kitchen. My parents cornered me when Julia was upstairs, their words hissing like snakes. "You'll regret this," my mother snapped. "We'll make sure they take Julia away from you. You think you're safe, you're not." My father loomed close, his voice low and threatening. "You don't deserve her. We'll prove it." What they didn't realize was that Julia had been sitting on the stairs, clutching her stuffed bunny, listening with wide, terrified eyes. That night, she crawled into bed with me, trembling, and whispered, "They want to take me away." My heart clenched so tightly I thought it might stop. That was the last straw. The very next morning, Grandma called her lawyer. By noon, officers were at the door again, but this time it wasn't me under scrutiny. They stood in the hall while my parents stuffed clothes into suitcases. There was no drama, no screaming, just the zipper's rasp and the flat snap of a folder as one of the officers handed them a no-contact order. Grandma's voice was cold, final. "You'll find somewhere else to live, and you'll leave Megan and Julia alone." They left under police supervision. And that night, Julia slept through without waking once, her first full night's rest in weeks. I sat awake longer, watching her small chest rise and fall, tears stinging my eyes with a mix of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in my life, I felt the balance shift in my favor. Months passed, and word traveled through the family grapevine faster than wildfire. One cousin whispered to me over the phone that my parents had gone to Becky for help. The irony nearly made me laugh. After all the money, all the sacrifices, all the ways they had put her on a pedestal, now when they had nothing, they came crawling back. And Becky's answer, "It's not a good time. Money's tight. The hypocrisy was almost comedic. My parents had poured countless thousands into her down payments, renovations, furniture, while I had been told to be grateful for scraps. Now that they needed her, she suddenly couldn't spare a dime. By the end of the month, whispers grew louder. They'd been spotted at a shelter. Later, someone mentioned a dingy rental in a rough part of town. The image struck me with a strange blend of bitterness and relief. For once, they didn't fit into Becky's polished picture either. Meanwhile, life in Grandma's house shifted into something new, something fragile, but hopeful. Julia finally had her own small room painted soft yellow, her favorite color. Every night she filled the walls with drawings, bright flowers, smiling suns, stick figure families where she always stood in the middle, not erased, not forgotten. Each morning, Grandma beamed at her across the breakfast table, her smile warm and genuine. For Julia, it was like sunlight after too many winters. We weren't rich, we weren't glamorous, but we were safe. And for the first time in years, I felt like we were a family that truly saw each other. Still, I sometimes caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, bracing for the echoes of my parents' threats. But Julia's laughter filled the house louder than their silence ever had. And with every giggle, it felt like healing. One evening, months after the eviction, Julia climbed into my lap, her hair falling across her cheeks. "Mommy," she said softly, "are we going to be okay forever now?" Her question caught me off guard, because I wanted so badly to promise her yes. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We'll be okay, because we have each other, and that's what matters." She smiled, small but certain, and leaned into me. I realized then that maybe I didn't need to erase the past or seek revenge. The greatest justice was giving Julia the kind of life where she knew, without question, that she belonged. Seasons shifted, and with each passing month, the weight on my chest grew lighter. Julia thrived in ways I hadn't seen before. She brought home drawings from school, proudly tacking them onto her yellow bedroom wall until it became a gallery of sunshine. She giggled with Grandma at breakfast, running to show her little victories like a spelling test or a new story she'd written. Slowly, I began to notice something new in her eyes: confidence, where before there had been doubt. Life wasn't easy. I worked long hours, balancing shifts with the needs of a growing child, and bills still stretched us thin. But when I tucked Julia in at night, when I saw her smile in the soft glow of her bedside lamp, I knew every struggle was worth it. She wasn't the erased little girl on the Christmas card anymore. She was a child who knew she mattered, and that made everything else manageable. My parents faded from our lives like ghosts. Every so often, rumors trickled in. A cousin spotted them arguing outside a store. Another mentioned they had moved into yet another shabby rental. There was no stability left for them, no pedestal to stand on. Becky, the golden daughter they had invested in, kept her distance. She had her own carefully curated life and family to maintain. And my parents didn't fit the image anymore. For all the years they had bent over backward to keep her shining, she dropped them the moment they no longer added to her perfection. Sometimes I wondered if they ever regretted it, if my mother ever thought back to that Christmas morning when Julia held up a card and asked, "Where am I?" Did she realize how deep that wound cut, or did she still believe it was better that way? That erasing my child was the price of her tidy picture, I never got an answer. And eventually, I stopped asking the question in my own head. Their choices had written themselves into permanence. One evening, as Julia and I sat with Grandma, the three of us playing a simple board game, Grandma looked at me with tired but steady eyes. "You know," she said softly, "you've done better than any of them. You loved when they withheld, you stayed when they cast you aside, and you fought when it mattered most. That's more than any parent could ask." Her words settled into me like warmth, a truth I hadn't dared to believe. For so long I had felt like the discarded daughter, the one who had to fight for scraps while Becky was handed the world. But sitting there, watching Julia laugh, I realized that my worth had never been defined by their neglect. It was defined by how fiercely I chose to protect the child who looked to me for everything. The night stretched on in gentle quiet, the kind that didn't sting or threaten. Julia climbed into my lap with her stuffed bunny, now frayed from years of comfort, and pressed her cheek to my chest. "Mommy," she whispered, "we're happy now, right?" I wrapped my arms around her and smiled. "Yes, baby, we're happy now." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. Looking back, the lesson feels simple, though living it was anything but. Families are supposed to nurture, to include, to hold every member close. But sometimes, the people who should protect you are the ones who try hardest to erase you. And when that happens, the choice becomes clear: you can accept invisibility, or you can carve out a space where you and the people you love are seen, valued, and safe. My parents lost everything because they couldn't see beyond their obsession with appearances. They thought love was conditional. That worth depended on uniformity. That loyalty was something to be bought and rewarded only in one direction. But love doesn't work that way. It's the small, everyday choices that build family: holding a child when she cries, telling her she belongs, standing between her and those who would diminish her. So yes, we are not rich, we are not polished, but we are a family, stronger than we ever were before. And that is worth more than any glossy card, any perfect picture, any fortune handed down. If you've stayed with us through this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Grandma did the right thing by cutting off her own daughter and son-in-law, or should she have tried to keep peace in the family? No matter the cost, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.